Before getting into this episode, I wanted to mention that the Endurance Podcast is partnering with Move Pre-Workout for this season. I'm delighted by this partnership because Move Pre-Workout is something that I've been using in training for the last year. Here's one of their tubs here. And the formulation with Move Pre-Workout is specifically to help you start sessions properly hydrated, giving you a smooth, sustainable energy and supporting stamina over long efforts. So avoiding any spikes or any issues, making sure that you can do the ride or the run in good form. It's science-led, informed, sports certified, and built to fuel performance without disrupting it. If you want to give it a try yourself, and I'd encourage you to do so, please go to movepreworkout.com and put in the word endurance at checkout for 20% off. Well, welcome back to the Endurance Podcast series. If this is the first of the series that you're tuning into, there's many more. Series 1, which was recorded a few years ago, captured wise words from a whole range of sports scientists who supported amazing athletes. And for Series 2, we're meeting not just the sports scientists, but also athletes, adventurers, and people who are involved in community building. And the whole point of the Endurance Podcast series is to not just hear life stories, but also hopefully to share information that people can take into their own adventures, little or large. And I've had the pleasure of watching Kenton's career over recent decades. I guess even though we've done many very, very different things in our careers, we've been at this for a while. In terms of adventures all over the globe, so I've always admired what you've done. We've shared the stage at events before, but I've never had the opportunity to have a conversation like this. And context again for those who are coming new to the Endurance Podcast series: Martin and myself are on our own endurance mission. Martin going bigger each year. First year around Yorkshire, second year going the length of England and down to the south of France and the Med. Next year, the two of us are going to buddy up with Jenny Graham, female round-the-world record breaker, and Hamish Graham for an epic ride the length of Europe from north to south. So as we bring to a close the end of our sort of Kendal Mountain Festival podcast experience, what's your reflections, Martin?
Well, so the first time I've been to this Kendal Mountain Festival, it's been really good. It's been really good fun. We've had some amazing conversations. This podcast setup is totally new for me as well, with having an audience. But this worked out really well. It's been nice having people engage and see them smile and see the interest. So yeah, I really enjoyed it.
And just to reassure people who are listening or watching to this in the future, there is a live audience. Say hello, everyone. Hey, they're real. So let's bring Ken.
And we've got live music behind us by the sounds of it. It's quite off-putting.
We're gonna give the people who listen to this in the future FOMO of the fact that there's a big rave party happening behind us.
Glow sticks and everything.
Right, so as we should always do, let's start at the beginning and then bring us right up to speed. Kenton, I'm sure you've answered this a million times before, but where did that adventurous spirit come from? Where was that sort of acorn for what has become a lifetime of adventures and big mountains?
Well, I wasn't born in Swindon like you were, but I was born in another town that begins with S. I was born in Slough. And did somebody laugh then? You spent time in Slough? Yeah. Yes, how was it for you?
I worked there once.
You worked there? What, in the Mars bar factory? They've got a Mars bar factory. But yeah, I was born in Slough. And Slough's pretty flat if nobody's ever been there. It's got not much going for it. But I grew up in the corner of a farm field. I was born in Slough, I grew up in Uxbridge, and a corner of a farm field, and my father happened to be a scout leader. And that was my conduit to the outdoors. We just spent, when we had no money growing up, it was a little wooden bungalow, no mains drainage, no central heating. And myself and my sister spent most of our time just outside on the farm, just doing, not working on the farm, but just out in the woods, out in the fields, avoiding being spotted by the farmer, jumping fences. And I think that's probably where it started, or at least a love for being outdoors.
And it's obviously a big hop and a step and a jump to then not just taking on your own major expeditions, but guiding and supporting others. The bit I would love to get to this conversation is that bit around, mentorship and supporting, because it's one thing taking yourself to these extraordinary places and the records that you've set just by going back and time again, and Everest in particular.
Boring, huh?
But no, not at
Same
all.
mountain, round 15, 16, 17, 18.
But you've also had that incredible sort of duty of care, not just to the people you're with, but also the place. So where I would love to get this conversation to is you've done a huge amount, not just in terms of sort of, you're pushing your own ambitions and ability, but also being a custodian and really trying to mentor people in terms of how to operate safely in these environments, and also, frankly, leave no trace. Be incredibly sort of careful, cautious, respectful of the environment you're in. So, I'd love to take the conversation there before we get to some specific expeditions.
Blimey. Where to begin with that? Where do we unpick that? If we roll back the clock a little bit, I was quite the opposite. I was very, very consciously unsharing with my knowledge. I think that partly becomes, if you're a climber and you're researching unclimbed peaks or routes, or climbs, you want to keep that knowledge to yourself a little bit, just in case somebody else comes along and does it before you. But then as I grew a little bit older, I was reading an interview with Conrad Anker, who was talking about mentorship. And I think it was a conscious decision, I don't know, I'm making up, 15, 20 years ago or something like that. And I just thought, this hard-earned knowledge that you gain, why simply hang on to it? It's probably one of the most selfish things I've ever done. And I suppose there's two arms to what you're talking about. One is my guiding, where I look after people professionally in the mountains, be it Everest or Pakistan or wherever it is. And then the other one is, is the sharing of knowledge with others on a sort of amateur basis, perhaps giving feedback to places that they perhaps could visit, or maybe places that I think would be great to see young teams go to. I sit on the Mount Everest Foundation screening committee, for instance, and we one of the things that we do, we give out money to generally younger teams going to really cool places. It's all exploratory. And then you also mentioned about the way that I work with the local people and the environment out in Nepal, and to try to conserve the very reason why we go there in the first place. And it's very easy and I hold my hand up, because to get to somewhere like Nepal, you've got to jump on an aeroplane, which is one of the most destructive things that we can do as individuals. I think it was George Monbiot said that, the three main things that we can actually have an impact to on our planet is where we get our energy from, the way that we travel, and I think we're probably much all guilty of using air travel to a greater or lesser extent, and where we get our food from. So I'm very conscious of the damage that I can do by flying around the world. But there is this amazing thing. I don't know if you've been to Nepal. You probably both have. You've probably ridden around Nepal. I don't know. It's an amazing place, and when you go there, you can't help but get sucked into the culture and the religion and the people and the environment and the landscape. And it's a desperately poor country, and you just want to give back a little bit, because they are so generous in their own right. So I haven't really answered the question, have I? Kind of skirted around it a little bit. But it was a big question. I don't know where to begin to answer that one. So
it's good. It's good.
Straight for the jugular.
No, it's good. It's good. It's good. Well, it's nice to throw you questions you're not used to answering. But I've noticed your journey from somebody who was, mission led in terms of taking on these incredible feats and then guiding others. But then some of your thought leadership and communications around, how do we do this more carefully? How can we be good custodians, good travelers, be respectful of the cultures that we're interacting with? And it's just something I've observed. So I just wondered how you thought about it.
It's one of those really, I don't know how many of you are aware of this. So I did a podcast a little while ago with Leeds University, and it was all looking at glaciers, because this is one of my big things. I spend a lot of time in the mountains, obviously, and glacial retreat is a big issue. Every single glacier on the planet is retreating. And I recorded the podcast with Duncan. I'm going to space his surname. A glaciologist from Leeds University. And we're walking down to the station together at Leeds. And he dropped this utter bombshell. So we came together because he was on Everest this year doing a study. And he dropped this bombshell that by 2080, so what's that, 55 years' time? by 2080, there will not be a single glacier left in Europe. No. Get your head around that.
Yeah.
Now, you and I, Mark, we're probably not going to be around, but my children will almost certainly be around still. And they're not going to have a glacier to go and explore and have an adventure on and understand and be part of. And that was really scary. So this sort of custodian of the planet, and this is what we can all do, and this is, I suppose, moving away from endurance, but it's arguably one of the most important things that we can do is try to look after what we have before it goes. Yeah. And when you hear facts like that, hard facts, this is one of the world's leading glaciologists say there won't be a single glacier left in Europe. It's so scary. So what can we do to try to help preserve that sort of thing? I think it's our duty as individuals, I'm not in a spotlight, but I do have a minor voice. And I think it's really important to start a dialogue about it all. Even though every time I post about glaciology or global warming or climate change, there's a tirade of abuse on social media. It's just like, you've got to be kidding me.
Well, I mean, many people never get to actually see and experience glaciers. And I guess those that work that is your office, get to live in these places. You'll be seeing that change firsthand. Lightening the tone slightly, my friend here was delighted to hear about the Leeds connections. He was
we were talking about that just before, weren't we? Yeah.
So you're a partial Yorkshireman.
Well, I would take that. I would take that. Yeah, I wish I was. Yeah, so I was at Leeds Uni, then stayed on a little bit afterwards, and then ended up. I spent 7 years in Sheffield. But yeah, love Leeds. Big Leeds. Big fan of the city. Great university. Arguably the best university in the world. I would say. I said that once. I had to give thanks at a dinner. So I was given an honorary doctorate at Leeds University, and I had to give the thanks after the celebration dinner. And I actually said, I paused, and I said, "Listen, we'll make a toast to probably the best university." And then I stopped and said, "No, the best university in the world." And I got pulled up on it afterwards.
Really?
Yeah, I got told off by somebody. They say, "You can't say that."
Were they not from Leeds?
They probably weren't. Yeah, they probably weren't.
Sheffield or something, Manchester.
Yes.
I'd like to ask something about in 1996. I believe you had a quite serious accident, and you were told.
You believe or you know?
I've read.
You've done your research.
I've read.
Yeah, 96. I made a mistake. And we all make mistakes. I'll tell you the amazing thing about this in a minute. So what happened? I don't know how many of you know me or don't know me. I fell off rock climbing.
You fell off rock climbing?
I fell off rock climbing and hit the floor. And
from kind of what height?
I was really close to the ground.
All right.
Like 15 feet, 14 feet.
High enough.
Yeah. I should big that up, shouldn't I? It's about 150 feet. No, it's about 15 feet, as in North Wales, and I broke a hold and I fell off. And I hit the floor and I ended up with what's called a bilateral calcaneum fracture. So I basically pulverized both my heel bones. So you think about the skeleton foot is that little bit that sticks out at the end. So if you see me, I'm constantly moving. And more often than not, I wear shoes like, I don't know why I'm wearing brogues today, because it's about the worst thing I can wear because it hurts my feet. So I'm in constant pain. I've got loads of metal work in there. And at one stage, and this is the amazing thing. So I was at an event in London, the Festival of Happiness, a couple of weeks ago. And I had the graveyard shift, a bit like today. So I was keeping everybody from the bar at the end of the day. And it was lunchtime, and I'm just there, and I'm chatting to a woman over lunch, and there's this big looming figure next to me. And I'll get to the point of this in a minute. There's this big looming figure, and I was like looking at this guy, and he was like trying to muscle in on the conversation. And I'm like, God, what's going on here? It's like sort of mega groupie. And but he looked vaguely familiar, because when I was in a hospital bed, this is before because I ended up having 3 operations. I got moved from Bangor back down to Slough, Wexham Park Hospital, and then I ended up in the John Radcliffe and then the Nuffield Hospital. And this is a really important learning point for everybody: the way that we position things to those around us. So I'm in the hospital bed waiting for my first operation, and a consultant comes in and he drops the bombshell that I will never walk without a stick. I will never run. I'd probably be able to ride a bike.
Yeah.
Because it's low impact.
Yeah.
Definitely won't climb again. He almost laughed when I said about climbing. And this totally crushed me.
Yeah.
Now my word, I was 21, 22, and my word, it'd be like saying to you guys, well, you can't cycle anymore. Everything that you've done is constructed around that one amazing thing, that one thing that brings people together. And there's this person is taking that away from you. So he's crushing, my sport, my community, and everything. And then about an hour later, so there's two guys in the room, the consultant and his registrar. And about an hour later, the registrar just came back in. And he said to me, maybe don't take what my boss said to heart. Is what you want to make of it. That's the important thing. And he left. And I never saw him again until 2 weeks ago.
Really?
So what was that? 28 years later, he saw my name on this thing for the festival. He's super senior in the NHS, and he had come along to this Festival of Happiness, partly to try to get some ideas about leadership and bring in his team, his cohort. He works at Reading now. And there he is. He's like 6'4", ex-pro rugby player called Sean O'Leary. Couldn't make that name up, could you, for a rugby player? And he's now like a senior knee surgeon. And I instantly recognized him. As soon as he broke into that conversation, there was the guy. And it's so important. On one hand, you've got the consultant just taking away dream and ambition in just the way that he's presenting things. And then on the other hand, you have somebody who says, is what you want to make of it. And it's such an so long-winded way. I'm hijacking this, aren't I? We're not going to get to endurance. I had this really bad accident in '96 and was told that I wouldn't walk without a stick.
And how long then did it take you to fully recover?
I was in a wheelchair for the best part of 4 months. So I was in hospital for about a month, wheelchair. They tried to give me a Zimmer frame, and I turned that down. So in a wheelchair for about 4 months, on crutches for about another 3 or 4 months, and then slowly started to get back to it. It's the only time I've ever used a turbo. I can't just like, anybody in the audience use a turbo train? I bet you use it all the time, don't you? That hand went up over there. How do you do that? I mean, that's endurance right there. I think the maximum I've spent on a turbo is about 20 minutes. It sucks the mojo out of me. I don't know, how do you do it?
Pot kettle black.
Oh, my God. But that's the only time I spent on a turbo, because it was a one-way, because it's low impact. Because I couldn't walk properly, but you could get the movement through being on a turbo. I must have watched Top Gun, because we had a video recorder. This is like '96. And the only thing we had was Top Gun. I must have watched Top Gun about 100 times while sat on a turbo.
But I mean, but this is a story. This is a story that you hear so many times, isn't it? Where you have a massive setback in life, or a massive diagnosis, or a failure in business, or whatever that thing is, and as catastrophic as it is, and as much as it resets everything in terms of like you're on some success trajectory, and then that completely crushes that trajectory, and then from that point on, there's the fact that everything has changed, everything was changed permanently, but then how you react to that clearly becomes pretty fundamental. And I think that's often missing from the equation, where you sort of treat the human being as if we're completely robotic around what happens next. And I think these sort of things in hindsight are often wrapped up in sort of like luck or positivity or all the rest of it. But actually, there's a lot of complexity to how you then, figure out what your individual response is to that thing that happened to you. I mean, obviously, Kenton, in your specific situation, you have a big fall. You have a situation where one expert in the field has told you you'll never climb a mountain before, and then you go on to break records and climb Everest more than most. And, I mean, there's a hop and a skip and a jump in there. But I'm fascinated in that bit where you then go, okay, well, the experts told me this, but actually the journey I'm on, I'll listen to that, but I don't need to be defined by that. I mean, that's endurance, isn't it?
For me, so some of that works really well for me. I think there's two forms of motivation, and I think perhaps, a lot of us sort of fall under this umbrella. Are we motivational speakers? Well, the simple answer is no, because motivation comes from within.
Yeah, agreed.
You can't.
Agreed.
But I think there are two types of motivation. One is positive motivation, and there's another one which I call negative motivation. And positive motivation is the carrot. Is what's in front of you, and you strive to get what that is. Perhaps it's financial success, maybe it's material trappings of life, the nice car, the good clothes, the house, or whatever it may be. That's positive motivation. And I think that's rather shallow, but it works for some people. And if it works for you, more powerful for you. What I think is more powerful is negative motivation. And what I mean by that is, how far would you go if you think you are going to lose something close to you? So in my case, on the hospital bed, being told by that consultant, you can't climb again. What I read into that is, I'm going to lose my community. Because my community, age 21, was simply climbing. Now, when that's taken away from you, how far will you go so you don't lose that? And that is super powerful. And that was the motivator to get me on the turbo. And hands on heart, I hate a turbo. I threw one out the other day, actually. We got a skip at home at the moment. We have it clear and I get rid of that thing. But it's the only time I've been on a turbo, and I know it's a bit tongue-in-cheek, but I just could not envisage life without that community. And I think that I think it's deeper than simply coming, because we are tribal. I mean, this is why people come together. This is why things like CrossFit or Hydrox or climbing clubs or cycling clubs are so work so well, because they are replacing the tribe.
Yeah.
Because it's like-mindedness. So to lose that's what got me back up, and then running. And then beyond that, it was like, how shallow is my ego? I kind of like the accolade of like going to Everest and go, oh, you're the Everest guy. It's sort of, so that perhaps came later. but that negative motivation because for me, the carrot doesn't work.
I think there needs to be both. I think, because it's not just trappings, isn't it? There's the aspirational bit in terms of what you want to do, the goal, but often when you're in it, the fear of failure and the bit you're running away from and what you don't want to be is equally powerful. And you're one of the only people that I've ever heard talking about negative motivation in what I would call a positive sense, because I completely assign to that. I completely agree with the fact that when you're actually doing hard stuff, the stick is almost greater than the carrot. Like when you're sitting at home having a coffee, thinking about the thing you want to do, that's very much sort of the positive outcome bit. But often when I'm in it, I'm not particularly positively, but a positive mindset doesn't really work for me. A performance mindset is actually what I do matters. It's not like I cannot be unnaturally positive when things are going badly. I just need to remember that this matters more than most. And the harder it gets, the more important it is to show up. And like, that's the stuff with a wry smile you're going to look back on and say, well, that was, death warmed up, but actually that was the time that counted most. And that's, if you then wrap it up in sort of positivity, it doesn't work for me. I'm just like, no, just be accountable and like what you're running away from and the fear of failure. And when you're a professional, when you're doing it as your job, the professional accountability around what you do, I feel very real. Like if you're doing it as an amateur, if you keep going or quit, it's up to you. Whereas, by the time you've got sponsors and you've got clients and, you've got that professional responsibility, you're answerable to more than yourself. And, that can be quite a lonely place, even though you're within a community.
Oh, yeah, well, massively so. I mean, sort of in my guise as a professional mountain guide, I predominantly work in isolation.
Yeah.
So it's just me. Very rarely do I get together with, my other sort of mountain guide friends, and, partly because I've deliberately chosen that path. I mean, I walked into base camp here earlier and immediately walked out again. I mean, I think I am like one of the world's biggest introverts. I mean, I can't handle. And I just like doing my own thing at my own pace and not being held that accountable to anybody else. But you're right, all of a sudden there are stakeholders, i.e. the client. And all of a sudden that becomes a really big thing. And then the negative motivation then is huge because, and I speak like you do, Mark, I speak a lot to organizations, and it's like a bit of a bugbear of mine. I was working with an organization only last week, and I won't say who they were, but they get sort of senior partners who are literally just going through the motions of what they do, knowing that they are really safe and comfortable in their environment. And I always leave them with this hanging question: what keeps you sharp? What keeps you focused on a daily basis? Because in the mountains, what keeps you sharp is that negative motivation. Because if you get it wrong, generally someone's going to die, and that's bad for everybody. So I often show this image of it's literally a set of boots. I mean, it is a dead body on Everest. And we have this sort of what do you call it? Like a mantra: don't get dead. It's an obvious one. Don't get dead. But we can use it in so many things. I mean, why do you get up at, I don't know if you do this or not, but why do you get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and train? What are you training for? Well, I mean, I don't train for anything. I train for life because I don't want to get dead. Be it in the mountains, be it, in my sleep or whatever. I love life. But you see so many sort of professionals, when they get to a certain point in their careers, if they don't have skin in the game, then their comfort zones are never being pushed. And, there isn't that negative motivation because organizations generally can't sack people unless it's really bad. So, people just get lazy and they're no longer doing a thing that once drove them to get to that position in the first place. So I think, that negative motivation we were talking about, I think it's a huge driver because, when you're young and you're in your career and you're working for one of these big organizations, you want to get to that position where you get accolade and you get financial remuneration and blah, 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 blah. But then once you're there, generally people do get lazy because they know that they are safe. Whereas if you're cycling around the world or you're doing these amazing things like north to south in Europe and, if you don't put the time in the hard yards, you're not going to attain the goal that you set out to do. Yeah. And I don't know how that sits with you, but that sits very badly with me.
There's a lot of truth in that. Love that. Absolutely love that. The Endurance Podcast is brought to you in partnership with Enjoy Travel. Huge thanks for all that they do. And I don't need to introduce my co-host, but over to Martin Mansell to explain Enjoy Travel.
So Enjoy Travel brings you car hire, hotels, airport parking lounges with a loyalty platform, meaning you buy 9, you get your 10th free. And you can mix and match across any range of our products. You don't need to just buy 10 car hire, you could buy a hotel, a car hire. And we're giving you a special discount code to celebrate our podcast, which is RID3R, as in rider, and you'll get up to 30% off everything.
So click on Enjoy Travel. It's been amazing for these epics, makes our travel so much more enjoyable and seamless. So thanks Martin, thanks Enjoy Travel. Take us into, I'm genuinely interested in that balance in your career as I've watched it between the missions you've taken on yourself, the Himalayan trilogy, taking on these sort of big epic expeditions yourself, and then some of the clients, some of the high profile clients you've taken. And you do have a public profile, you're very modest about it, but you've built a platform, arguably the highest profile, guide in the UK and what you've gone on to do. So how have you thought about this in the different chapters of your career? I'm genuinely interested because you have gone from that point where you're driving your own career, you're taking on missions, you're trying to do firsts, and then you've then got the opportunity to take other people into those beautiful places. Like me, you're not a spring chicken, you've been doing this for a number of decades. And I think for those people who are either setting out on their careers or figuring out what the next chapter of their career is, I find that interesting because you look at anyone who's got a platform and you think, well, they've made it. But I think when you've quote unquote made it, you're always trying to figure out what that next chapter looks like. So, clearly the continuity candidate for you is a great love for the mountains, that sort of wanderlust. But give me a sense of that sort of personal fire, the want to try and do difficult stuff, to then moving into working with clients. I'm genuinely interested in that because there's lots of people listening to this podcast and indeed here at Kendal who are thinking about their own careers in the outdoors.
Well, I just unbuttoned my thing. It's quite pertinent. Chapter 3.
Okay.
Which is David Miller's brand.
Yeah.
The ex-pro cyclist.
Yeah.
And for him, Chapter 3 represented...
Fellow Scot?
Indeed, yeah. Although he wasn't born in Swindon.
No.
Can you be Scottish and be born in Swindon?
Yes, definitely. Yes. Yes.
So chapter 3 for DM was his career pre-drugs, career after drugs, and then career after retirement. And I mean, I think it's really interesting that he has forged this part. There are distinct periods to his life. And have you ever read any Charles Handy?
No.
So Charles Handy he writes about the second curve. I mean, he's like an early business consultant. I'm trying to think what his book now, 21 letters to his daughters. I mean, it's a great read. I'll send you a copy. 21 letters to yourself or something like that. Anyway, he talks about the second curve, that whether it's career, personal life, you have the bell curve. And as that bell curve starts to dip off, the next curve, the second curve, should be taking off. Because if you allow it to wane too much, you're going to lose it. And if we use sort of David Miller's 3 chapters, I think you can almost break my own life up into sort of amateur climbing. Then you've got perhaps early guiding, and then you have the Everest years. Not wanting to steal a phrase from Chris Bonington, but they are 3 very distinct parts of my life. Yeah. So the early years, just climbing for myself, doing my own thing, and then I met my wife, and I suppose the second curve or the third curve, the Everest curve, had already lifted off. I went to Everest for the first time in 2004. I met Jazz, my beautiful wife, in 2006. And she had what I would call a proper career. She was working in the city. And we sat down one night and she said, so you're a professional mountain guide? This is quite early, but it's kind of dated. And she's like, well, I almost swore there. What the hell is that? I'm like, yeah, well, I'm this guy that can ski and do this and do that. And she goes, great, what are you going to do in 5 years? I'm like, I'm going to guide. It's going to be great. I'm going to be climbing and skiing. What are you going to do in 10 years? I'm going to be guiding. I love it. What are you going to do in 15 years? I'm like, yeah, I'm going to be skiing and guiding and clock climbing. And go, no, you're not. You're going to be crippled. You need to diversify. You need to start looking at other stuff. Because the state of your body, you are not going to be able to keep doing what you are doing at the intensity that you are currently doing it. So if you want longevity to what you are doing, you need to diversify. And it was at that point, I just like, Christ. Yeah. Because my love is mountains. It's just being in the outdoors. It's rock climbing. It's skiing. It's, climbing big mountains. It's, shared experiences. But I'd already experienced that near miss back in '96, the accident that you make reference to, when somebody said, you were going to lose your community. So the last thing I wanted to go through again is to lose a community of guiding and being a guide and being in the mountains. So, 2000, I met Jazz in 6, so kind of 7, 8, I started to legitimately look at what next. And it's a journey, as you know. I mean, there's no definitive answers for people like ourselves. I started to do public speaking. We've got a business consultancy, in Cool Company, looking at high performance. How can we develop, winning cultures within organizations? How can we translate what I've learned over 30 years through blood, sweat, and tears? How can we bring that into the boardroom? So we got all this bubbling away as well as the guiding. So I don't guide anywhere near as much as most of my contemporaries. Nowhere near as much. And because of that, it keeps the spark and the love alive. Now, I used to guide, and I'm making up, 200, 250 days a year.
Yeah.
My body can't cope with that these days. I mean, Christ, I'm 52. It's beginning to fall to pieces. Partly because I haven't looked after it over the years. That don't get dead thing. I wish I sort of had that as a motto like 30 years ago. But I can keep going because I don't do as much. And because I don't do as much, and it's one of these cliches, isn't it? The more you say no to clients, the more they want to actually do it with you. So my rates went up and up and up and up and up, and it just means that I can legitimately take less work, earn the same amount of cash, and look after my body, meanwhile diversifying other things. So it's actually been a conscious choice to where I've got to. It hasn't always worked. I don't quite know what the next curve, what the next chapter looks like, because I've said in my mind, I've got Everest next year, which is 26, 27, and 28, and that's it. And I've got clients lined up for that already. And this is very materialistic, and forgive me if it shatters the romance. By then, the mortgage is paid off, and school fees are paid, and there'll be a little bit in the bank, and then I can look at what comes next. But that needs to be teed up now, 3 years in advance.
And these careers have overlapped. The thing I'm fascinated about is that the fact that you have gone into business consultancy as well. And this is the Endurance podcast, but lots of people listening to it are taking, the conversations we have about endurance, and so much of what you have talked about, believe it or not, in the last 40 odd minutes is absolutely about endurance thinking and mindset. But so many of the listeners, it's entrepreneurship. It's communication styles, it's decision making and whatnot. And I know that you were.
Yeah, I'd like to ask about how you take everything you've done in your high performance in the mountains and on Everest, and how do you translate that into developing a high performance team in business?
Well, you're going to love this. So what we did, I say we because it's myself and Jazz, and we got a number of people that work with us, and in many ways, and this is almost like reverse engineering, because we talked about failure earlier, and failure is such an amazing tool for learning, because how often when something goes right do we then pick it apart? Very, very rarely. It's normally when things don't go right, we're like, well, why didn't I cycle around the world in like 79 days and 12 hours, But you did it, so I wondered to what extent you picked that one apart. But what we did a number of years ago is our interest was piqued on why I was in the Yakin Yeti Hotel in Kathmandu, and he's speaking tomorrow. We're on a panel discussion tomorrow. Lucas Furkenbach, one of the big Everest logistical organisers, bumped into me at breakfast in the Yakin Yeti Hotel, and he said to me in his beautiful Germanic Austrian accent, which I can't imitate, "How do you do it?" I'm like, "How do I do what?" He goes, "Every single year, you choose the right day to summit Everest. You avoid the crowds, you get your clients up there, you get them out of there, they have a fantastic experience. How do you do it?" I'm like, "Oh, Lucas, it's luck." He's like, No. Luck is doing it once or twice or maybe 3 times. You don't do it like 16, 17 times. It's not luck. It's more than that. And that really piqued my interest. So we went back to Leeds University, and we sat down with the human behavior faculty of Leeds University, and we worked with them for about 9 months, looking at what high performance or peak performance, or whatever you want to call it, what does it look like? What are the building blocks to high performance within organizations, within teams, within the individual? And what I'm really, the proudest thing about that is, we did that after continued success rather than failure. So it was a success that piqued our interest. And it came down to what we call the 5 pillars of high performance. And in conjunction with the human behavior department, we constructed what we call the 5 pillars of high performance. But, and this is the giveaway, this is the free one. People normally pay like vast amounts of money for this. The bedrock to those 5 pillars. Those 5 pillars are brilliant. It's communication, it's collaboration, it's drive, it's direction, it's agility. But the bedrock, that not even the glue, the bedrock, what it's all built on is trust. And it's trust in 2 ways. I mean, when you talk about collaboration, when you talk about teamwork, it's trust in those around you. It's trust in the team. It's trust in the process. It's trust in the preparation. But on the individual level, it's trust in yourself. And this is a really interesting one, which I think is overlooked too often. And you can package it in lots of different ways. You could call it self-confidence, or confidence, within yourself. But essentially, it's trust. You are backing yourself to do something, and that's really, really powerful. Really powerful. So what we're doing these days within organizations and within businesses is we have unpicked what success has looked like in the mountains with Leeds University. And I hate to say it, but Leeds University have given us the credibility to then step up and be in front of organizations and say, this isn't just hocus pocus. We have spent 9 months developing this. And anybody read Lencioni? Lencioni's 5 dysfunction of teams. And Lencioni looks at it from a negative perspective, which, going on my negative motivation, is perhaps how we should do it, but we've turned it on its head. We're looking at it in a positive way. What do teams need to do to generate the cultures required for high performance? And we picked that apart. And that came to a certain extent from my wife's work with organizations. I mean, she's a coach. Well, we're both coaches, but I don't have the empathy she does. But mine came from learnings from, I'm looking at a picture of myself on Everest. It came from like years and years and years of working in places like the Himalayas, the Andes, the Alps. What is it that works? And let's distill that down. And then let's bring that into organizations.
That's really interesting. I could totally relate to what you say there about the trust. But how many businesses do you go into, or organizations, and you find that trust is, well, by comparison, really strong and completely lacking? What is there a kind of average split? Is it 50-50, 80-20? And how do you bridge that gap?
I mean, it depends so much on who the organization is and who's at their helm, because it can go in ebbs and flows. You can have an organization which is built around trust, but then you get a new leadership team or a new leader or a new CEO, whatever you want to call them, and it can be destroyed almost overnight. It's like reputation. Reputation takes years and years and years to build up, as does trust. And then once you have it, you have to defend it rigorously, because it's so easy to lose. It's so easy to lose. And then once it's gone, it's not impossible to get it back. But you have to grind arguably harder than you did first time around. And the trust, within organizations, it comes down to culture. And I don't care what people say. A lot of people say, well, culture is bottom up. I do strongly believe it's top down. It is led by the leadership team. It is led by those individuals who are at the top, because they have to be invested. They so have to be invested. But then, and this is where we clash in Cool Company, because I come from a very hard-nosed way of looking at culture, and my wife and some of our cohorts that we work with, they come from a slightly softer way. And I mean, I don't know how much time we got left, because I left my watch at home. But there's a really great learning here from Musk. And I know Elon Musk is a very diversive. He's a very Marmite character. And when Musk first walked into Twitter, into X had what was considered to be the most nurturing culture of any organization on the planet. And Musk blew it apart. You can have recovery days. So if you had a hard day at work, you could have a paid recovery day from that. It was very, very touchy-feely, woolly. And that's not my bag. Musk blew it apart. And he wants people looking over their shoulder. And he wants people worried that they are going to lose their position because somebody is going to come up and take their place. Now, I'm not saying that's a good culture, but at the same time, what Twitter had with that really nurturing culture wasn't working. And you might say to me, well, Casey, but how do you know it wasn't working? Well, X is a business and it needs to return a profit. Yeah. And they weren't. Nobody made a profit with Twitter until Musk came into it. Now, I'm not saying that his somewhat abusive culture is working. It's somewhere along that line between extremes, the two. Yeah. But what we do, we go into the businesses, we have our cultural model, we get the employees to, and it's an online thing, we look at it, we look at the results, and from that, we can then go to the leadership team and go, this is working, this isn't working. This is what you need to defend, this is what you need to work on. In exactly the same way that you would do with an expedition, or you would do with a training program. Or, the synergies with endurance are there. And I think this is one of the reasons why we're super successful within Cool Company, because I have learned the hard way through these things. In an environment which has far-reaching consequence. And I suppose this is one of the reasons why I kind of like Musk's approach, his more hard-nosed approach, because the mountains are really unforgiving. You've got to turn up with your A game every single time. You need A-class players around you, which is attributed to Jobs, but actually it was Kawasaki. And I think that's lacking a lot in organizations. And Musk sees that. He understands that. He wants the best working in X. He wants the best working in SpaceX. He wants the best working with Tesla and people like this. But at the same time, you need to get that balance right with the culture. And that's what we try to do in the mountains.
I think just as we bring things to a close, what I find interesting is, Kenton, you're somebody who is known for climbing Everest an extraordinary amount of times, and yet throughout this conversation, we've not asked you about what it's like to be on that mountain or Lhotse or any other mountain. The conversation has genuinely been about, motivations, overcoming, coping mechanisms, communications, the 5 pillars, and the thing that underlines it is trust. And it's interesting because trust, I think most people would think it would be trust between me and you, but actually the bit of trust that I heard you talking about is trust in yourself. I often talk about quiet confidence, that idea to sort of back your own ideas. And at the heart of, I think, the whole ethos of endurance or entrepreneurship or whatever that looks like is actually the quiet confidence to back your own ideas. Because if you don't back yourself, it's very hard to build the trust for other people to buy into that as well. So it's interesting. We were chatting before, Kenton and Martin, about like what we were going to try and capture in this conversation other than the obvious. And
it probably wasn't this.
I will it's funny because like I can't, people are always disappointed if I don't talk about cycling around the world. People are probably always disappointed if you don't talk about Everest. But my mission was to have a conversation where we didn't actually talk about what it was like to climb Everest. If you want to know what it's like to climb Everest, you've literally done 101 conversations on that. Make that 1,001. But it's interesting and challenging, I hope, to have a conversation about broader topics, because I don't care whether you're listening to this and you're actually planning to climb a mountain or cycle around the world or cycle the length of Europe the way Martin and I are, or you're a weekend warrior, you love your outdoors, but ultimately, the drive for you is ultimately around something you're doing, in the day job or family or community. So we're going to bring the conversation to a close, because I know there's other events happening this evening in Kendal, which we're going to let our live audience away to. But I want to finish on those thoughts. Hopefully, it's a different conversation than you're used to having. I really appreciate you taking the time to come along.
Pleasure.
Loved it, and we'll get you out on the bike soon.
Oh my God, I've not been on the bike for years. I was looking at it the other day. Actually, I've got this beautiful trek. I mean, it's still got rim brakes. That's how old it is.
No, well, it's going to happen. It's going to happen. But thank you, my friend.
No, it's been beautiful. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.